Okay, so we're going to talk about different types of symbols, and we're going to talk about working with tweens. So you have been already working on this in your discussion board for this past week. So we know that a graphic symbol is the most basic kind of symbol, and it don't support ActionScript filters or blending modes. So you use graphic symbols when you want an animation to be synchronized to the main time frame. The next kind is a button symbol, and button symbols are used for interactivity, and they contain four unique keyframes that describe how they appear when the mouse is interacting with them, just like you see a button when you go to a website. And you need ActionScript to make them functional. So with buttons, you can apply filters, color settings, blending modes to your buttons. And the most powerful of the three is the movie clip symbol. It is very flexible. You can apply filters, color settings, blending modes, and each of your movie clips must be on their own independent timeline. They can control movie clips with action scripts. So the first of the tween that we're going to talk about is the classic tween. In a classic tween animation, you define the keyframes at the point in the animation, and Flash creates the content of the frames in between. So let me just show you what I got here. I have a layer and I just called it tween. In a keyframe 40 is where I'm going to put my keyframe, but I'm going to just start here with keyframe 1, and I'm going to create a little symbol. Let's make a little circle here. So it has to be on its own timeline. It can be a graphic symbol or a movie clip. So I'm going to convert this. I'm going to right click and I'm going to convert this to a symbol. Since it's just a very simple image, I'm going to make it a graphic symbol. So I'm just going to give it a name. I'm going to call it classic. And I'm going to hit OK. And if you notice in your library, you can see your classic tween has gone right into your library. And I'm going to go back to my properties panel. So your classic tween cannot be raw artwork, groups, or shapes. And you know you've done something wrong as opposed to having a nice straight blue line when you see a broken line. Because Flash documents save the shapes at each keyframe, you create free keyframes only at those points in the artwork where something changes. So you can create certain types of animation affected by using classic tweens that are not possible with motion tweens. It just really depends upon what you plan on doing in your project. So let's just do our keyframe at 40. So I'm going to insert a keyframe. And at keyframe 40, I'm going to take my little symbol I have here, my graphic symbol. I'm going to move it to the end. And I'm going to do something different to it. I'm going to select it on the timeline. Let me just close that off. And I'm going to select over here where it says color effect, style, and I'm going to choose tint, make it red. So at keyframe 1, it looks like this. At keyframe 40, it looks like this. I may do something different. I may make it look bigger. So let's see what we have so far. And then I'm going to insert a classic tween right about in the middle. I'm going to right click, insert a classic tween, but while I'm still here, I'm going to put a rotation on it. Maybe counterclockwise rotation. So let's see what we have so far. Now you know that this, I'm going to pull this up so you can see. You know that we did something right because it is a nice blue all the way straight across, and the line that we see indicates that there is no broken line. So whatever we wanted to do, we accomplished, and it's going to come out okay. So let's hit the return. Okay, so we put the little rotation on it. Now let's see if I want to try to do something different. Let me just put a keyframe at 10. I always like to fool around and see if I can do something different. Let's just do a rotation counterclockwise. Let's see what happens. Now what if I decide at keyframe 10? Okay, let's just select it. Select my object on the stage. What if I decide to change the alpha on it? Maybe if I bring it down. Let's see what happens. So we can change the effect on different keyframes if we like. But in between the keyframes, Flash will create your the transformation of your object from the first keyframe to the last keyframe. So next we're going to talk about is a shape tween. Shape tweens are kind of fun to work around with. In a shape tween, you draw a vector shape at one specific frame in the timeline. It doesn't have to necessarily be at keyframe 1. It really just depends upon, you know, what you do in your animation. You can start your keyframe at keyframe 100. It really just depends on what you're doing. So Flash then interpolates the intermediate shapes for the frame in between, creating the animation of one shape morphing into another. So the best works with very simple shapes. So let's just try this and see how this looks. You have to remember though, when you're some of the rules for a shape tween is it has to be a raw artwork, and it uses simple shapes, and you place shape tween elements on their own layer. So let's just create a new layer. I'm just going to call this shape. Make sure I spell it right. And at the first keyframe, I'm going to create a triangle. Okay. And then at keyframe 40, I'm going to insert a keyframe. I can move this one that I have here if I want, or I'm going to actually create another whole shape. Let me just make a different shape. Let me make a circle, and let me change the color. Or maybe even make it more red. So somewhere in the middle, I'm going to actually even do something. Let me just do this for a second. Let me just select this and make it even bigger. Kind of looks like the one on the top. So somewhere in the middle, I'm going to insert a shape tween. See, it's allowing me to insert a shape tween because it knows that this is a raw artwork. And you see how that first shape is morphing into the next shape. Let's just try something different, okay? Let me just add a new layer. Let's just call this shape 2. I sometimes like to play around and just try to figure things out when you work with the program. Half the time that's basically what you really do. So at keyframe 1, I'm going to create a shape. And then at keyframe 60, I'm going to take this shape. I'm going to insert a keyframe first. I'm going to actually get rid of this shape that's on my screen here. So at keyframe 1, the shape is there, but at keyframe 40, there is no shape. I'm going to try using a text. I'm going to change the color to blue. I'm going to make my text a little bit bigger than that. Let me make it, let's make it 60. And just make a letter, maybe the letter A. I'm going to make this a little bolder. Make it real bold. Okay, I might even just rotate it. Just play around with it a little bit. Or maybe even make it bigger. So I have to go up to modify and break apart. Remember, it has to be raw artwork, and if it's not changed into raw artwork, I won't be able to make the effects that I want to make. So at keyframe 1, my shape looks like a square, and at keyframe 40, it looks like a letter. So somewhere in the middle, let's see what happens. I am going to create a shaped tree. So let's see what happens. Interesting. You see how it's actually morphing into this letter. So you can play around with this, and there's other things that you can do as you're working on this. You can also use an ease, which controls how fast the objects start or end on the shape tween. You can use a blend, which creates an animation in which the intermediate shapes are smoother and more irregular. Or you can use the blend with the angular, which creates an animation that preserves corners and straight lines in the immediate shape. So you can pretty much do whatever you want. If I select right here on the keyframe, and you over here where you have distribute, and then you have angular. So you can play around with this. Here's your ease right here. You can make it go fast. You can make it slow down. It really is dependent upon what you want to do. Okay, so now we're going to talk about a motion tween. A motion tween is a very powerful tween that you can use in Flash. A motion tween begins with a target symbol instance in the first keyframe of the tween span. It does not necessarily have to be the very first keyframe in your timeline. It can be a keyframe anywhere along the timeline. You create a motion by adding a property keyframe somewhere later in the timeline and changing the symbol property. You can change things such as positioning it, scaling it, rotating it, changing the color, all the individual things that you might want to do to your image, whatever you're working on. And then you can open up the motion editor and you can edit your image. So it's a very powerful tween. It must be a graphic symbol or a movie clip symbol. It cannot be a raw artwork or groups or shapes. So the tween must be on its own layer, which it is. And you will know you did something wrong if you see a broken line as opposed to a straight line with an arrow. So the very first thing I'm going to do is create a shape. Okay, and then I'm going to right click. I'm going to make it into a symbol. I'm going to keep it a very simple graphic symbol. I'm just going to call it motion. And then I'm going to hit OK. So keyframe 40, I'm just going to insert a frame. And still at keyframe 40, I'm going to insert a motion tween. So, you can go ahead right now at keyframe 40. And I can do something to this. I can change its color. So I can go over to the color effect. Maybe I'll change the tint. Maybe I'll change it to a red color. Okay. So you can also, if you select on the keyframe itself, if you want to do any rotation or anything like that, you can do that. But I'm not going to do that right now. I'm going to actually take this image, I'm just going to move it, and now you see that it has a path. If I select anywhere along, I can actually move my image and I can actually alter my path. So anywhere that I select, I can move my image and alter the path. Let me just hit the return key and see what it looks like right now. So keyframe 40, I may want to change something else on this image. I may want to make it look a little bigger, or maybe even distort it. Well, let's hit the return key now. And you see that it changes along the path. So you can just kind of play around with this. I suggest that you use a simple shape first and just get used to using all these different tweens before you start trying to put them on your file. You need to get used to what all the different things that you can do. So you can change the color effect, you can change the tint if you go over here, you can change the alpha if you want. You can increase that or decrease that. You can create some sort of fading effect. You can change the position anywhere along this path if you like. Just select along the path here and you can change your position Just make sure that you have the select tool selected. Now if I double click this, watch what opens. If I double click this, I'm opening up my motion editor, and I can actually go through and I can actually fine tune my image anywhere along this timeline. And you see when I make a change in my motion editor that you can actually see a little dot, and that's telling me that I've made this change. So now if I want to make a change here, I can do that here and just select a little dot. And let's see what it looks. You have to be very careful because it's very sensitive if you for any kind of change, if you make the change too much. So you have to be really careful. You can also expand this if you like so that you can fine tune it a little more. Just hit this little button right here that increases or decreases it. So anywhere along the timeline you can move this if you want. Just hold your mouse down and move it. Say I decided I want to put my motion here. I can do that. Let's see what this looks like. Like I said, you have to be very careful because it's very sensitive. So you can just keep on playing with that. You can put an ease on it. You can put a rotate on it. If I decide that here I want to put a rotate, if I select right here on my timeline, and I can go over into my my properties panel, and I can select a rotation on it. And you see you actually have the rotation shows now along with the location, so you can just kind of work with this, and you can really fine-tune your image to do just about exactly what you want it to do. So it's pretty an amazing tween. The motion tween is very powerful. Like I said, I suggest that you just play with using a small little graphic like I have here. Practice selecting the item on the stage and changing the colors. You know, you have to select the select tool, try playing around with the alpha, the brightness, the tint, and just do a lot of different things in your image and change, along the path. So this is it for all the different tweens. Like I said, it's probably best that you practice first before you start putting these tweens on your image. Now, one more thing that I'm going to show you before I close out here is I'm actually going to go down here. Let me just make this a little smaller. And if I can select onion skinning right here, and I can actually visualize all the transitions that are taking place along my timeline. So I can expand this, and I can actually see this will help me to visualize what is actually taking place in my image that I have up here. I'm just going to take this off, so you can turn this on and off as you're working on your file, just to see what is really going on and how this is going to affect your image. So next I'm going to talk about how to use the different tweens working with text. Okay, so we're going to talk about using tweens with your text, because you're going to be wanting to use your text in your file. So we're going to first create my text as a movie clip. So remember, movie clips are very powerful and flexible, so you can apply filters and color settings and blending modes, but most importantly you can apply an action script to your movie clip. So the first thing I'm going to do here is just write my name. Just go ahead and grab my text up here. I'm going to position it to where I want. I'm going to position it right over here, and then a keyframe, keyframe 40. I'm going to insert a keyframe, and I'm going to move my text over here. You might want to just text it, make sure that it's okay, that it's where you want it. So somewhere in the middle, I'm just going to insert a classic tween this time. And I'm going to do something on it. I'm going to put like a little rotation. And a keyframe, the very first keyframe, I'm just going to fade it out. I'm going to select my text on the stage. I'm just going to put a little alpha on it. Now let's just hit the return key and see what it does. Now if I add another keyframe somewhere along the line, I can change my rotation. And go back to that. I'm going to put it counterclockwise on it. Let's see what it does. So very simple. We can create all different kinds of effects. But just remember now, if I want to put anything on, any kind of action or anything on it, I have to use a movie clip. So now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add a new file. I'm going to change this, put a new file. Make it an action script 3. I'm going to make this a little bigger so you can see it. So I'm going to write my name again. So I'm going to go up to the top here and I'm going to go where it says modify. I'm going to first make sure it's selected with the select tool. Go modify, break apart. Now you notice once I do that, my letters have broken apart in the timeline. I'm going to select them all, and I'm going to select them all one at a time, and I'm going to convert it to a symbol. You used to be able to drag it into your library, and CS6, I think you can still do that. If you open up the library, you can just drag your image into the library, but in Cloud it won't let me do that. So I actually have to do each individual one. So I have to convert it to a symbol, and I'm going to make them a movie clip again and name it my letter, and then hit OK. So you'll notice that it's going into my library. Sometimes my right click doesn't work too well. I don't know why. And you notice that it's going into the library as I'm doing it. Like I said, I have each individual one here. And I'm going to select them all again. I'm going to go up to the top and go modify, timeline, distribute layers. Modify, timeline, distribute layers. And I'm going to have all my letters on my timeline. I'm going to get rid of that very first one. I'm just going to trash it. Now I have all my letters here. So each individual one is on my timeline. So I'm going to insert a keyframe at 40. You can select the first one and the last one, right click, insert a keyframe, and I'm just going to simply select at keyframe 20, and I'm just going to use a simple classic tween. So this basically what you can do is if I want the letters to end up on keyframe 40 here, at keyframe 1, I can move each of my letters somewhere I can put a rotation on all of them if I want, just by selecting the Shift key. Make sure you're at the Properties panel, and you can put a rotation on them all. Hit the Return key, and they're all going to end up where you want. At the first keyframe, I may want to select them and change their color. Change the color on each one. Maybe change the size, maybe distort them, rotate them. So you can kind of see what I'm doing here. Each one at the beginning keyframe may want to do something different. You may want to put alpha on it. Just go to the keyframe on each one. Now just select R, and just have to kind of play around with it. Just decide, make sure you select it on you have to select the letter on the stage in order to change the color effect. Maybe make it a whole different color. And just hit the return key as you're playing around with this, just to see what it looks like. So you're kind of getting the idea of what I'm doing here. Now before I leave here, I just want to show you a little bit of some of the different tools that are in Flash. One of them is that they have some motion presets already in their default presets. And you can get to this by opening up Window and selecting it on your end right here, motion presets. I just want to show you what this does. Let me just make a new layer. Let me just get rid of, actually make a whole new file. Okay, so I just have to move this and bring it out just so you can see it. I'm just going to make a very simple symbol. Make a little circle. And I'm going to right click. I'm going to convert this to a symbol. I'm just going to make it a graphic symbol. And I'm going to hit OK. And at keyframe 40, I'm going to insert a keyframe. Okay, so I'm going to go back to keyframe 1. Now I'm going to play around with some of these presets. If you select them and open it up, it says default presets. Just open it up and you will see there's all different kinds of effects in here. Let's try this one. This one looks kind of neat. I'm just going to go up to this little icon right up here on top, and I'm going to select this, and I'm going to say apply to current location. Then I'm going to hit OK. Now watch this. Okay, so I'm going to change this. I'm going to try something different. Let me try this blur. Nope. Let's just fly in from the bottom. Okay, I'm probably going to have to get rid of what I have. Let me just undo it. A lot of undos. So let's just go back and try something else. You can play around with this. Try different effects here. Let's see about this smoke effect. Let's see if this works. Well, that's pretty interesting. So let me get rid of this one. And let me just play around with some of the other ones. Here's one that's really interesting, the text one. We'll work on that in a minute. I'm going to try this zoom one. So Flash has some pretty interesting things that you can apply to your image. You just go through and look. Some of these are, you have some presets in here already. and just try different ones and see how they are. If you want to use any of these in your project. And you can, of course, you can adjust these too. Now if I double click the timeline, and you can see that I can go through and I can change settings on this too. And double click the timeline to close it up. So just kind of play around with this. There's quite a few in here. I don't know if you need any of these for your project, if you might want to use any of them, but it's just good to know that they are there. So that's the end of this tutorial for you. I hope this really helps you work on your project for this week. And if you need any help or assistance, just let me know.